Hey, this is Michael Lindsay. I'm here at Racetech today, and we have the all-new WP XACT Pro SuperTrax shock. I'm going to tear one down. I'm going to have Rob, who's the head of R&D here, help me explain pretty much the ins and out of this new shock and really what the new technologies are that's inside. Now that we got it all apart, I've got Rob Brown here, who is head of R&D here at Racetech. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a couple things I wanna run through you and basically ask your opinion of and kind of help me break down a little bit farther than what I can explain. So first things up is, we tore this down pretty far. This is the actual sleeve unit that is inside the shock shaft now, and this is what they call their new SuperTrax system. First time I saw the dual adjusters, at least, on bottom of a test bike they had in Europe about 2 years ago, is my first thought was high speed and low speed rebound. And that's kind of how I equate what I visually see with it. And of course, this system is different than their outgoing track system. It's not exactly the same functionality per se. Can you help us break down a little bit of what makes this track system different than their old one? And from a suspension standpoint, such as yourself, how would you explain the function of each one?
On the old one, it was more of a mechanical position sensitive, and it basically would change the rebound and release it at top out. So anytime the tire was off the ground, that's when it would actually make the change. This one is more of a, I guess you could more look at it as a high-speed rebound adjuster, but it's more based on velocity position, what the spring's doing, but it's more of a velocity sensitive than it is so much a position sensitive adjuster.
So compared to the old system, where, you know, if somebody's going to ride it, what do you think they would feel difference-wise? How is the system going to react on the track, and in what situations would you say you would feel it become active?
With the old system, you know, in comparison-wise, the old system, some of the riders would say that they could tell the on-off of the mechanical transition between the two, you know, between the track system. This system, I think, is going to be a little bit more linear and harder to feel the difference as far as position, and maybe more of a more consistent feel. Not so much it won't be such a variance in change.
Now the old system, if you wanted it per se disabled, a shop such as your guys' self actually had to physically take it apart and shut off the system, and that's pretty much what you could do. A little bit of the pitch here is it does have an adjuster actually now, and that's it's able to actually move this sleeve up and down and change the activation of the system. To what extent, for somebody who doesn't know, like how much of a variance are we really probably going to be able to see out of this system? And when it's fully closed, is it actually fully locked off, or is there even still a little bit of give when you fully close the adjuster?
Even with it fully closed, it's not going to lock it off completely. As far as the change, most of your rebound adjusters and the change you feel, whether you push on it, ride on it, and the feel that you can normally feel, the low speed adjuster is going to mostly affect that. As far as the high speed or the track system, SuperTrax system, I should say, as far as that system, that's going to be more of a high speed scenario. So it's more if you get like a snag as far as the bike packing or something, you can tune that without ruining the feel of your low speed control.
So the reason we were talking about why the system actually wouldn't per se fully lock out is due to this spring right here. Can you give us a little explanation about how this rod right here, how it actually activates the system and what exactly it's doing to this needle here?
Yeah, absolutely. You have basically two rebound needles here. You have one that's down the center of the shaft. That is going to have its own seat inside the shaft itself, and that's going to be a nice linear low-speed control. And
yeah, what we're usually used to.
Exactly. It's just a needle orifice like we've used for years and on end. Then you have a plunger itself that actually is going to go back down the shaft, and with the spring, it will basically be putting tension on this piston. So as it's a high-speed scenario, it has to open that spring compared to just a slow-speed bleed through an orifice. So this one actually will be a lot more speed sensitive. But even at a full lockout, you're still going to have where the spring can physically move because it is not completely coil bind.
Yeah. Another big change going into the XACT Pro SuperTrax shock. Something the race team has been on for a while. This shock is actually a bladder system instead of a sliding piston system. Like I said, their race team shock has been like that for 2, maybe 3 seasons now. But the outgoing consumer Trax shock that they sold was always the sliding piston design. Now the one they're selling is in line with what their professional racers are on. From your standpoint of view, from all your experience Specialized, can you explain to somebody what's a little bit of the differences in feel or performance between the two systems?
Yeah, this is again is my opinion and my feedback that I've got. The piston design typically is a very easy, functional, it's easy to dissipate the temperature between the oil temperature into the reservoir gas to help cool it that way. The negatives to it is you do actually feel some friction from the piston switching direction, that O-ring actually sticking in the resi. So some of the riders do feel that, but as far as durability, reliability, the piston's extremely durable and reliable. So it's a good design in that factor. As far as the bladder and when people see a gain on that, I typically get the feedback that it's better on off throttle scenarios where the rear end is light and they feel like it's less deflection. And I think that has some to do with that piston having to switch direction where a bladder just actually squeezes, even though they're running the same exact pressure.
Would you even say guys would notice, because you're talking about that switching direction, sort of a freeness going from compression rebound, say you're packed down a little bit on acceleration shop as it's quickly moving between a compression and rebound situation, you're going to feel a little bit more plush or softer feel on the bladder possibly?
Yeah, it seems to be a little bit quicker responsing because it doesn't have to switch direction. And there is the drag in the piston. No matter how we look at it, there's some drag there because it has to seal. And there's the argument whether or not that is a better cooling shock versus others. Some say the piston cools to the resi side through that piston, which there's an argument there. But then there's the other argument that the bladder has actually got the entire area around it that releases the temperature through the entire reservoir. So there's a plus and minus. But as far as the feel, I usually get the feedback that it's when the bike is light is when you typically feel that less deflection.
And then another big standout feature with these shocks have always been, you can see the dual compression adjusters. We have one that is doing high speed control and one that is low speed control. What's the advantage of having these, even though they're feeding through the same housing, what's the advantage of having them physically separated as pieces, and is there any disadvantages to having them completely separated?
The only disadvantage that I could say would be the cost maybe as far as making the other components. 2 separate components, I should say. There's more parts physically there. The advantages may be, you know, and it's an opinion based, but separating the 2 circuits and not having that overlap on the circuits can be an argument that it's better. By no means do I think it's worse. So if any direction, it could be, it's a positive if anything. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How is it from a tuning example for you guys because of the different design from a low speed to the high speed, being able to tune them, take them apart? Is there any advantage to having them separate from a tuning application, or is there anything you can accomplish more with this than a single, or is it relatively the same for your guys' tuning experience compared to how you deal with maybe, you know, more traditional design shocks?
It's very similar for us. You know, as far as the circuits, the main difference is one of these is nothing more than a needle and an orifice, and it's just plugging or opening a hole. As far as this, there is some factor that we don't have to deal with that circuit at the same time as far as assembly, disassembly, but for the most part, it's pretty close.
Mm-hmm. So seeing this thing taken apart in the bench, is there any other per se advantage or something special about the components that stand out to you compared to a production shock? Is there anything you particularly like about the system, or anything that's, you know, if somebody came up to you and go, why would I get one of these? Well, what stands out to you?
I do like the bladder. I do like, you know, they do have the adjustable preload adjuster. There's the metal difference between the standard body and this body. This is a more of a billet head. Top out spring rate has changed. You do have the SuperTrax system, which I think there's going to be, you know, a use and a tuning ability that there's going to be a rider and a place for that system. You know, as far as the shaft diameter, body diameter, all that stuff's the same. I just think it's everything that we do as a tuner, you're always trying to make the component better. The bikes aren't bad these days, so it's just another component to try to move in a better direction.
And these just came out. There's also a new set of a slightly updated cone valve fork. It's not really that different this year. This was more the bigger upgrade per se, or bigger component change for them. And you guys are one of WP certified centers. You guys sell all this. You get it like the one we took apart. This is the base setting as they sell them. You guys get them that way, and then you can also tune them even further for whatever the consumer wants, so they can get their hands on these now.
Yeah, yes. There is some back order scenario right now as far as receiving them, but I hear there is some coming in as we speak. But as far as, you know, the component, you can get it as is with the base setting. And it is a universal setting. They do the best they can to make it work for a range of riders, but it's still not straight personalized. So there's, you know, the adjusters can personalize it, but if you want it personalized, yes, we can upgrade it to where it's exactly for you.
Cool. Thank you for your time. And if you want to check out any of this, you can hit up Racetech. They also have all their service centers in different states. You can go on their website, figure out where all those are. You can also reach out to the Corona location that we're at right now, their HQ. That's where their main line goes, and they can get you the information on one of these, when they're going to be available, how they can get it to you, what they can do in terms of upgrades, and a little more options on the forks and other things they sell as well. If you are interested in getting some Racetech tools, maybe a revalve, or even some of the kit suspension we talked about in this video, you can hit the contact information for me in the description below this video, and I can put you in touch with those guys, maybe save yourself a few dollars there. Also, if you like this video, make sure you hit subscribe. We're getting the bike testing season. There's going to be a lot more great bike reviews and shootouts and cool stuff like that coming, on top of all the tech info pieces like this I've been doing as of late.